2, 1.
Good morning, Evan Sanchez here, welcoming you to another episode of Springboard Your Biz TV. I'm excited to have a special guest with me today. We've got Rick Robinson of Ramsee Consulting Group. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate you inviting me to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about strategic direction. You know, Rick and I have run into each other on consulting projects, webinars, different things that we've done. I've seen you present before, and I knew that he specialized in strategy, execution, and engagement. And I think, you know, one of the most important things about, you know, a company's growth is understanding the maturity. And when you understand the maturity, then you have a vision, and then it's all about executing on that vision. And when you don't have the strategic direction, which some people don't even know what that is, there's really no way for the vision to come to light.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, one of my favorite quotes is, a vision without the ability to execute is a hallucination.
I've had a few of those. Yeah, I think all entrepreneurs have some hallucinations sometimes.
Yeah, but the vision's got to come, you know, the direction, the strategy has to come first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't know where you're going.
Yeah, kind of like the whole, you know, a dream is not a plan kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's the whole idea of strategic direction and what we're going to talk about today. You know, we're focused on helping you break through the craposphere, which is all the noise that's out there. We want to help you with performance improvement strategies that are going to help you grow in our new environment. And again, you know, Rick's been focused on developing and delivering a variety of programs in the areas of leadership development, project management, lean manufacturing, team building, strategic planning, measurement systems, and change management. And I know that that's a lot of words that I use as well, and that's why I was really excited to have Rick here with me today to add some new perspectives. And Rick's going to dive into kind of the growth, expansion, mature side of things a little bit. And here in the beginning, I'm going to dive into a little bit of the, you know, inception and survival stages, so the earlier stages, because the level of detail that you need is different based upon where you're at. I also want to, you know, talk a little bit about this overall arching theme that we have that has to do with how customer behavior has changed and our environment, you know, the whole work from home and virtual, and, you know, the way that we're trying to adjust in this new business environment. What are some of the things that you've seen that have impacted you or some of your clients?
Oh, gosh. How much time do we have?
It's a long list.
You know, I had an in-person meeting with a client last month for the first time in about 8 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's changed everything, and adjusting to Zoom and Teams calls, et cetera. And within my clients, you know, I do a lot of work with municipalities, and you wouldn't think that this would have impacted their revenue as much as it has. But you think of sales tax revenue and those kinds of things, and the impact moving forward on housing prices potentially, et cetera. It's just all reaching.
So you're starting to see a ripple effect in a lot of different ways already.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Well, you know, again, we're all trying to navigate this new environment. And I think that, you know, we all have to really think about what we're going to do, you know, from a strategic standpoint when we talk about how we're growing our business. How are we going to utilize video? How are we going to start to use some of these virtual platforms? What are we going to do to utilize the different technologies? And then how do we get those all to communicate in between? So that's kind of the theme of the strategic direction piece in the Performance Springboard that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to give you a couple of ideas around what we represent or what we recommend when we go and talk to a client who's maybe in the inception or survival stage. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit. You know, what are some of the things that you come across? I know what I come across, but like this whole SWOT analysis thing, right? Because that's usually the most basic thing that people know of and they've heard of. And you say, okay, yeah, let's start out with a SWOT analysis. Right. What do you typically get when you see that?
Well, I usually get an eye roll.
Yeah, like, oh, yeah, great.
Oh, geez, not another SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
We've done those. It doesn't work. They're a waste of time. And I, you know, bottom line is I'll agree with you that a lot of the ones I've been involved with were a waste of time. And the reason is that most of us are doing it wrong. And most of us are not taking advantage of that thinking that goes in. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, there are some common mistakes that we make doing that.
If I use a golf club to hit a baseball, it's probably not going to be very effective.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I think that, you know, that's kind of where the whole Springboard Your Biz business model that we use as a coaching tool in our community and in our masterminds is, it really does matter where you're at as to what exact tool you're going to be using, or even some of the questions that you're asking. So I like to start out and ask people, you know, well, what is strategy? And the most basic answer that I can give you to that question is, your strategy is essentially a set of decisions that define the nature and direction of an organization. So when we come into organizations and we try to understand what level of maturity they're at so that we're asking the right questions. And we offer those questions as part of our community to help you grow your business. And, you know, for the first 50 that join, I think we're up into the 20s now. That's actually going to be free for a year. So those strategic questions are the guideposts. They're providing the strategic direction, right, for any business to grow at any level.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the best quotes I've seen on what is the nature of strategy, and I apologize to the author because I can't remember where I read it, is strategy is all about figuring out what game you're going to play and then developing a plan to win that game.
Yeah, right. So it's proactive versus reactive, right?
Right, exactly. And if you're playing a game that a whole bunch of other people are playing, you've got your work cut out for you. So how can you define the unique game?
You're going to be playing in the craposphere.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so here's another way to help, you know, some of our clients when we're talking to them in the very beginning. And you know, I have worked with $50 million companies, $100 million plus companies, and companies that are startups. And it's interesting, they fall in all of these different levels, you know, and really a lot of it just depends on where the overall leader is coming from. But here's a couple of little ideas to help you understand where you may be in your own strategic maturity. So, you know, think about this. Are you kind of in the, hey, I really haven't ever been strategic, I've been more reactive? You know, maybe you've looked at some finances and made some investments and said, hey, we're going to try and get some traction in this market, and you've shot off and gone to work, right? That's really not conceived. The embryonic stage is where maybe you've done a little bit of SWOT analysis that's actually been productive for you, and you don't really have a consistent definition of your strategy, and you're not really able to replicate it, so you're just trying some things out. The next level is really kind of that adolescent level where you've done some strategy work, and we're going to get into what does strategy work look like here in a little bit. But you have lots of room for improvement. So you're learning, but you're still not necessarily an expert at it. Then you've got the middle age stage, which is where you have some experience with it. You have a process for strategy formulation and implementation, but there's really no means, you know, to implement it, right? That's usually where the implementation part of it comes into play. They've got the strategic vision, they've got the strategic direction, and they've got this roadmap, maybe even a project plan, but when it comes to execution, it all falls apart. So this is usually where I see those $30 to $40 million companies, even the $100 million companies come into play. And we start talking about, well, do you have, you know, the corporate strategy aligned with your product strategy? And then from your product strategy, is that aligned with your sales strategy? And is your sales strategy aligned with the marketing strategy? And if you don't have those four elements aligned, you really can't get to what we call old and wise, where you have a rich history of effective strategy formulation and implementation that actually gets results. So, you know, what do you think about those levels, and you know, do any of those bring any stories to mind?
Well, absolutely. And the important thing to note, two things. One is it's important that you're thinking about your future regardless of the stage you're in. The rigor that you put into developing a strategic plan is going to be different. In the early stages, your main focus is increasing revenue. As you move forward, then you start worrying more about cost containment. And towards the end, you start talking about reinvention. But it's important that you've got a disciplined and a repeatable way of going about generating a shared vision of the future, if you want to talk in general terms. The other thing is that it's important that you have a repeatable process, right? And a lot of times people say, well, strategic planning doesn't work. We had this plan and we never did anything with it, or it didn't work out the way we thought it would be.
Right, sat on the shelf, collected dust.
Exactly. Well, even if you tried to implement it and it didn't work well, the thing I like to point out is the process of going through to develop your plan is as important, if not more important, as the plan that you develop. And by that I mean, we're trying to see in the future when we talk about strategy, and we're not always going to be right.
Correct.
So get over that need to be right all the time.
Right.
But the fact that I took my team through this process means that we're all aligned and we understand where we want to go, even though we may not know how to get there yet, or we may have struggles getting through there. So separate the process from the actual plan. We tend to think we need to write strategic plan, and there's not a right strategic plan. There's multiple plans that could work. That's where the execution piece comes in.
Yeah, and you have external forces that impact your ability to execute on those.
Absolutely.
Right? So we've got to also have some measuring and monitoring and ways for us to modify and adjust based upon what's thrown at us, kind of like a year like 2020, right?
Right. And when you get into execution, now you're talking about key performance indicators and dashboards and some sort of way to measure whether or not these assumptions I made during my strategic development plan, the development of the strategic plan, whether these assumptions are holding true.
Right, right. And I think that's really where the data collection comes into play too. I know, in some of the organizations that I've worked with that have had a mature strategic process, they ask for information from the staff and they ask for data to support those assumptions that they're putting forth. And obviously the assumptions that have some data behind them are given a little bit more weight.
Well, absolutely. And when you're looking at KPI and dashboards and measurement systems and those types of controls, if you haven't done the strategy work up front, you're not going to have effective dashboards because you don't know what you should be measuring.
Yeah, or even what to adjust.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so exactly. I think you see kind of the idea here that we're trying to present to you in helping you understand that there is a maturity to your strategic direction and your thinking and your leadership. What I want to do right now is just share with you one basic tool. Again, this is for more of the people that are just starting out, and actually this tool is good for any type of an alignment meeting, or if I've got a team that I'm trying to bring together and we've got a lot of different objectives, and maybe we have done that SWOT analysis, and we do have a bunch of information, and we can then take that information and say, okay, I want to make some type of strategic plan visible. And the reason you want to make something visible is that it actually brings it to life, right? It brings it out of your head, out of my head, out of my team's head, and it allows us to have this collaborative experience where we can say, okay, here's where we are today, here's our current reality, here's the future state, the ideal future state, keeping in mind our mission, vision, values, and goals for the year. What's going on out there? Take the information from the SWOT analysis. Take the information, the data that's being collected maybe from your customers, maybe from your frontline employees and from the environment, and say, okay, so in this example, how could we add video? How could we add work from home strategies? How could we add virtual ways of doing business given our current environment? So you would bring everybody together and you would use that as the common theme for the discussion. And you basically sit down and say, okay, what are the performance areas, the strategic initiatives that we think are going to get us to our vision? Once we align those and we get those identified, we can set a timeline and say, okay, so here's what our current state was, here's what our ideal state was. How long do you think it's going to be? Is it set for a year? If it's set for a year, well, what can we do in 6 months? What kind of major milestones can we set as goals to get to in 6 months? Then if that's the case, what can we do in 3 months? What can we do in a month? And then what can we get started on today? And the coolest thing about using a team app or something like this is that then the team can all go up and they can pull, little parts of the SWOT analysis, and they can put them on sticky pads and go and stick them where it goes. And then you can sit back and you can kind of have a conversation around that. Maybe you move some around, maybe you don't, but at the end of this exercise, you assign responsibility, which is usually the key to strategic direction. Would you agree?
Well, it's the key to execution, right?
Yeah.
And you got to fight the urge to assign multiple people responsible. Right? It's got to, in our perspective, it's one person. Because if it's more than one person, you get a whole bunch of, I thought you were doing that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Which is the key to getting the team aligned, adding to that strategic direction, adding the responsibility, and then actually having it executed upon. Because again, when you hold people responsible to it, you give people a vision, you give them some action steps, they're going to do it. And if they're not, you can step in as a leader and you can help them do it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's not about calling people out. It's about helping your team as a whole get to the ideal future state.
Yeah, and then once you have that clarity around roles and where you're going and we're all aligned, your review process is real simple. It's, are you red or are you green?
Yeah.
And if you're red, then the next question is, what are you going to do to get green? And the third question is, what help do you need from me as a leader? What resources do you need to implement your plan to get green?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, during this time as a leader, a lot of times when I go into organizations, I say I'm looking for two things: attitude and effort. And I learned that from coaches myself growing up. They look for two things: attitude and effort. If either one of those were not where they should be, you didn't get to start.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that I look at it too. So I hope that this transformation map helps you, gives you a little bit of an idea on what you can do if you're in the early stages. It's really all you need to get going. So, Rick, let's talk a little bit more about what you do with Ramsee Consulting Group around strategy, execution, engagement, because I know you get into a little bit more detail. And again, as you get into the growth, expansion, and mature stages, you know, you're talking about having a team. So now there's departments, and now there's stakeholders, and there's a lot of different interests that you're having to manage. So, you know, with that, what are the things that you start looking for?
Well, yeah, what you're describing is the increasing levels of complexity.
Exactly.
And what we want to do is create clarity from that. All this, you call it the craposphere or the noise, which can be internal, especially in a large organization, as well as external.
Internal, external, it's coming at you from everywhere.
Yeah. So to me, it's helpful to look at a little context on what is leadership and what is our role, what are our roles as leaders. And we look at it that there's three main functions of leadership. One function is to set direction. And we want to establish a shared direction so everybody knows where we're headed and everybody's interested in going with us.
Right.
After I set direction, we need to be able to execute our strategies. Like we said, a vision without the ability to execute it is an hallucination. And the third role is to engage and inspire people. And most leaders are good at one or maybe two of these things. And in very large organizations, these kind of get split up, so the whole leadership team fills those functions. But especially in our smaller organizations, I got to do all three if I'm a leader, and I got to get good at all three of these things.
Right.
But it all starts with setting direction and strategy. That comes first. And there's some levers we pull as leaders in order to fulfill these roles. One, for setting direction, that's what strategy is all about. In a very broad term, is strategy is all about setting direction. Execution is all about the controls we put in place and our structure and our infrastructure and having the right things. And engaging and inspire people is all about the culture of the organization and our organizational capability. But it all starts with strategy.
Yeah.
I can talk all day about our culture, but unless I know what our strategy is, I can't tell you if we have the right culture in our organization or not.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, when we talk to people about what culture is, we list out 6 different things. And one of the elements of culture is structure, and that's infrastructure, right? And tools also fall into that. So I know that infrastructure is part of, you know, that linchpin in even developing the culture that you want. So
Right.
talk a little bit more about the infrastructure that you see as being key in the very beginning.
Well, yeah, so if we want to talk about structure and infrastructure and the fact that strategy has to come first, just as an example, my sister works for a corporate relocation company, and she called me one day and says, hey, we're thinking about making a change in our structure. I said, okay. She said, well, you know a little bit about that, right?
Like an org structure?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just an org structure. We want to go from 3 managers to 2 managers. And I said, well, I know a little bit. I said, I'll tell you what, you buy me lunch, I'll tell you what I think. So I picked a really nice place.
At least you got paid.
You're right.
You got paid for the brainstorm. Excellent.
Right. Well, I think she felt a little shortchanged because we sat down to lunch and she put 2 org charts in front of me and she said, one had 3, they were beautifully done. One had 3 managers on it, one had 2 managers on it. And she said, do you think it'll work? And I said, I had to give her the standard consultant answer.
That depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
But being a good consultant, you have to know what it depends on.
Right.
So it will work depending on what is your strategy? What business problem are you trying to solve with this change?
Exactly.
And the answer was, we haven't really talked about that. We're just thinking of moving from 3 to 2. So,
somebody was overloaded.
Right. Well,
somebody felt like they were doing too much, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Or there wasn't enough, so then they were going to contract.
More than wasn't enough because they were contracting.
Okay, there you go.
And I said, well, if you haven't defined what you're trying to achieve, if you don't know what you're trying to solve for this, go for it. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter what
you
your
figure it out
like.
as you go, right?
Right. So, so that's, so same thing with controls. You have the right measurement systems, dashboards, KPIs. Are they right? I don't know. What's your strategy? Where do you want to go? Do you have the right culture in your organization to get where you want to go and attract the people you need to attract and retain them and have them love their job? I don't know. What's your strategy?
Were you intentional about it? Did you put guideposts? Do you have aspirations, or is it just something that came about?
And then the obvious one, do you have the right organizational capability? I don't know. What's your strategy? So the strategy is not more important, but it is primary in that it comes first.
So they have to have some kind of measurement in place and some type of data or track record to be able to say whether or not this is successful.
Well, absolutely. And where do we need to adjust? If I don't have that set, and the way I look at it is strategic planning, there's a lot of ways to define it. One of the best ways, if you think of a roundabout, right? So you get in the roundabout and you drive around in this circle, but sooner or later you have to make a decision.
Right.
You have to say, this is the road I'm going down.
Yeah.
And that's why they put mileposts or markers on the road, right? So I'm going to say, and that's what your KPIs are. I'm going to go down this road to get to Houston. And if the mile markers are showing I'm getting further away from Houston as I drive, I'm on the wrong road and I need to make an adjustment.
Right.
So that's what we do after we decide where we want to go. Then we have to put those mile markers or those mileposts or those measurement signs out that gives us the feedback that we need in order to adjust correctly.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Because you don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. That's where those assumptions come in at the very beginning, where some type of data coming from that even makes it stronger or more relevant to the planning process itself.
Right, and that's one of the relationships between strategy and execution. There's a lot of discussion, there's books written about it. But if I have bad execution, I can never tell you whether my strategy was good or not. Mm-hmm. So
which is where a lot of those companies go, oh yeah, we had a strategy, but we didn't really do it because they didn't have the infrastructure to be able to show the success.
Absolutely.
Or commitment to it maybe too.
Absolutely. And one thing I'd like to point out about, we say one of the roles is engaging and inspiring people. It intentionally does not say motivating because the root word of motivation is the same as motion, locomotive, automotive. It's all about movement. So if they're moving, they're motivated. If they show up to work, they're motivated. Now, I don't know what they're motivated by, and I don't know what they're motivated to do. What we want to do is engage them, right? And we want something that inspires them. And what is it that's going to engage them and inspire them? That's our vision. That's our strategy. That's the core values of the organization. All of those things that we lump into and call strategy or elements of your strategic plan.
Right.
A lot of people are talking about increasing employee engagement. The first question I ask is, what are you giving them to engage with? Mm-hmm. So, and I mentioned before that you need a disciplined and repeatable process for doing this. And we have we always start with a standard strategic planning process, right? And it's, we modify it as necessary as we move on based on the needs of our client, and a large part depending on where they are in their growth cycle. Right. Early on in the growth cycle, the rigor that we put into certain elements is less. You still need a vision. You should know what your mission is, but all your strategies are going to be around sales and increasing revenues. Later on, then we bring in other things. But it starts with a SWOT analysis, and I'll talk about some common mistakes of SWOT analysis in a minute. But as we mentioned, a lot of people roll their eyes when we do that. Some of the basic mistakes that people make is basing it anecdotally, not on facts, not on data. They consider things a strength that aren't really a strength, because a strength is only a strength if I can use it to increase sales or reduce costs.
Well, and some people can see a weakness as an opportunity.
Well, yeah. So one of the things is you've got to have strict adherence to the definitions, right?
Yeah.
Opportunities and threats are external. If I have control over it, it's not an opportunity or a threat, right? It's a weakness.
Okay, so say that again, because I think that's why people roll their eyes at SWOTs, and they don't really think they're effective. So number one, you need to have definitions of what a strength is.
Right. So strengths and weaknesses are internal to my organization. They're things I can control, and a strength is something I can leverage to take advantage of an opportunity, which means I can increase sales or I can reduce costs.
Right.
Weakness is internal, and it's something that keeps me from taking advantage of opportunities, right? So it means that it's keeping me from achieving my vision. It's keeping me from increasing my sales or reducing my costs.
Which is where you can kind of go back to things like, okay, well, do we have somebody that has the capability to do that? No. Okay, that's a weakness. Now you know that the capability was something that was missing, going back to your sister's example.
Right.
Where, okay, you were going to make this org change, but the capability wasn't there.
Right.
You only know that later, so she would have had to have done a SWOT analysis and addressed the issue of capability in order for you to be able to give her an answer as a consultant, right?
Right. So, yeah, and the interesting thing is a lot of companies, a lot of organizations of all types spend millions of dollars on fixing things they're not good at that don't matter. And it all ties back to your vision. What are you trying to achieve? And if it's not keeping you from getting there, maybe I have to just get good enough. But I don't need to go to the nth degree. I don't need to be the best in the world. I'm never going to be best in the world because that's not where we're going. That's not what we're trying to do.
I was going to say, that's when you start getting into brand strategy, and that's like a whole other conversation.
It's a big other conversation.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a whole other conversation, and that's why strategic direction gets so complicated for people, and people don't understand where they're at, where they're going, because they're missing these definitions a lot of times.
Oh, absolutely. And what we want to do with this standard process too is create a common language so that we're all speaking the same language.
Right.
So we start with the SWOT analysis, and there's several other things. We could go a deep dive on it, but it's those are the top few. Other things are things like when I look at opportunities. So opportunities and threats are external.
Okay.
So they got to be outside my control, outside my organization. If I'm doing it on a division within an organization, then it's outside the division. May still be in the company, but it's outside their control.
You may have some influence, but not direct control.
Exactly. So in opportunities where conditions are presenting themselves so that I can increase my sales or reduce my cost or increase customer satisfaction, something along those lines, right? So, years ago, it showed up everywhere, the growth of social media, and it still is an opportunity. And then threats are external, and those things that threaten my viability, right?
Right.
Now, something could be both a strength and a weakness. Say the experience of our staff is a strength, but the fact that we're going to have a brain drain in 5 years is a weakness.
Yeah.
So those can be related. But what I like to say is that an opportunity and threat is a choice. It's a viewpoint.
It is.
So because every threat everything I consider a threat is an opportunity for somebody. And you know this all
Glass
too
is
well,
half full or
right?
half empty, right?
Right. So you look at COVID as a threat.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, some people I know went out and created companies that sanitize work environments.
Yeah. Yep,
So,
absolutely.
That's the SWOT analysis, which leads us into a good frame of reference to look at the value proposition. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but we want to use that real simply. And then after I have my value proposition, we look at our mission and our vision and our core values.
Always keeping it aligned, right?
Keeping it in line, right?
Always keeping it in line.
And they tend to overcomplicate that. And I've seen organizations spend weeks, if not months, on a vision statement. And we do what we call a 5-minute vision. And not to get into the details of how we go about doing that, the 5-minute vision actually takes about an hour, but it sounds good to say it's 5 minutes. but we do that. But one of the things to keep in mind, definitions again. When I talk about vision, all I want to know is when you close your eyes and think about your organization 5 or 10 years from now, you know, you pick the horizon. What do you want it to look like?
Yeah.
Mission, when we talk about a mission, I talk about it, look at it from a military perspective. You know, if you give a group of Navy SEALs a mission and you get in their way, we all know what's going to happen to you.
Yeah,
They'll march right over, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're looking for, that thing
Yeah.
you're passionate about enough that you're going to march through walls to achieve. So we
Right.
want to keep those kind of definitions simple. And there's some nuance in there that it would help to hire, or not hire necessarily, but have an independent facilitator to help keep you on track, because you know, you're going to get a lot of great ideas through this process. And some of them are mission ideas, and some of them are vision ideas, and some of them are goals, and some of them are strategies, and some of them are tactics. Those ideas are like a barrel of oil coming out of the ground. And that barrel of oil is valuable.
Absolutely.
But it's not usable until you do what?
Well, you got to compare the ideas and check them with the
You gotta
vision and the strategy
refine
and the goals.
it, right? It's
Yeah.
got to go through a refinery. We separate the tar from the petroleum and gasoline, and all this other stuff gets separated out.
Yeah.
That's what goes through this process goes through, and that's where we determine where something belongs. So we want to get the ideas out. We don't want to stifle the creativity, but we want to make sure that on the back end we put everything where it belongs.
Right.
All right. So once I have my mission, vision, and values, your vision's pretty fuzzy, so I have a set of balanced scorecard goals that further define it. And then I break down those goals and say, what are my strategies to achieve the goals? And then I start putting together enterprise-level objectives. So just to get a little bit deeper in each one of those elements, when we talk about value proposition, we like to use the Tracy and Wiersma model because it's simple. I like simple.
Yeah.
And they wrote the book, The Discipline of Market Leaders. And basically, they say, from studying the good to great and built to last type companies, there's only 3 value propositions. You can be best total cost, which is total cost of ownership, or you can be best product and service, which is all about innovation and creativity and having the newest, greatest thing, or you can be the best total solution, which means you're going to solve your customer's broader problem. So you don't necessarily give them what they're looking for, what they ask for.
Right.
You give them what they need.
I've heard that termed as customer intimacy. You have a problem,
Absolutely.
we're going to help you solve your problem.
Yeah,
then you've got your OpEx, and then you've got your innovative leaders, like your Apple and things like that.
Those are so these are the value propositions. You just named the value operating models. So for each value proposition, there's a way to organize internally to deliver it.
Right.
For total cost, it's operational excellence. For best product, it's product leadership, product or service leadership, and for total solution, it's customer intimacy. So that's how you got to set up.
Yeah, I bring that up because I see companies get wrapped around that. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
They say they want to be something, but their operating model is not saying the same thing.
Or can't support it.
Can't support it, exactly.
Right? I want to be best product, but I have no R&D budget. Right?
Exactly.
Or, this gets tied back to the SWOT analysis, right? One reason people say they're not usable is they do it, they check the box because we said we were going to do it and we said we were supposed to do it, and then they leave it there. They never pull it forward. And there are inherent strategies associated with a strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if it's a strength, I need strategies to leverage it. If it's a weakness, I need strategies to fix it. If it's an opportunity, I need strategies to prosecute it. And if it's a threat, I need strategies to mitigate, since I can't control.
That's awesome.
So,
that's awesome. That's some true wisdom right there, folks. I'm telling you, if you've ever had any kind of question as to why your strategy didn't work, it was probably somewhere in that conversation right there.
Right, and we tend to skip over the SWOT analysis, which is a shame, because they can be really useful.
Yeah.
But only if you do them right. So that's the three, and then this, we've got a procurement model that one of my former business partners put together, and I absolutely love it, because like most 2x2s, you want to be in the upper right quadrant, and it's basically how difficult are you to replace as a supplier, and what is the strategic value of what you offer to your customers. So this is kind of looking at it from their perspective and taking a step back. And of course, we want to be in the upper right, which is where we're a trusted partner, and they include us in all of this conversation, and we know what's going on, and we're embedded.
Right.
And you could think of that as usually a total solution provider, but it can also be a best product.
Right.
But where the energy is in the market, right, through your competition and through your customers, is pulling you into that bottom left. Right? So if you have low strategic value and you're easy to replace, you're competing on price. So you better be a total cost business model, because
better be the Walmarts, right?
Yeah, and a lot of
better be able to beat the Walmarts or compete
absolutely,
with them.
Absolutely, and a lot of your customers want you there because it makes their buying decision easier. Right? If I got two apples that are equal and one of them's 50 cents and one's 25, it's obvious which one I'm going to buy.
Right.
Right. So when you talk about doing your strategies, what strategies are you going to employ to fight that energy to get you in that upper right quadrant? Right? And this gets into your marketing and sales strategies primarily, but also in your product strategies and, you know, what your reinvention strategies are, and, you know, product and service innovation. All of that gets you out of that bottom left and enables you to charge a premium because you become more of that trusted partner.
Right. All
right.
Unfortunately, those same pressures on price come, and a lot of times when you're in the sales world, you have to remind the customer about all of those other things that you're also providing when the bidding comes into play. I saw a post on that yesterday, and it always reminds me of Zig Ziglar. Were you concerned with the price or how much it costs?
Right.
You know, because you might be paying this, but the cost,
absolutely,
in the long run, it may be not worth that price.
Right, and that's why they make the point in the Tracy and Wiersma book that it's total cost, right? So it's not just purchase price.
Yeah.
It's acquisition cost, maintenance cost, disposition cost, et cetera.
Exactly.
And then look at residual value. What's it worth at the end? So
definitely.
One of the things when we get back, and this is again terminology, is the words mission, vision, goals, strategies, objectives, and tactics get thrown around interchangeably a lot of times. And from my perspective, it's absolutely critical that we talk about them and have a common language, right? So we do our SWOT analysis, that gives us our research, then we jump in and we say, okay, what's our mission? And the mission is really the who, you know, what we do, who we do it for.
Right.
And it's the foundation. So we have this building analogy that, again, another partner of mine, former partner of mine, developed that I think is absolutely fabulous. So we have the foundational piece, which is the mission, right? And if you think of a building, that's the foundation it's built on.
Right.
Your vision's up top in the clouds. It's very aspirational. It's where you want to go.
Yeah, it's fluid.
And it's fuzzy.
Changing a little bit, yeah.
So we need to define that a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are our 3 or 5 year goals from a balanced scorecard perspective.
Yeah.
You need one for your where you want to be financially, what your customer experience is going to be, what your business processes are going to look like, and then what your employee experience or your culture looks like.
Yeah.
So those are still somewhat fuzzy, but then we got to figure out how we get there, right? So if I'm at the ground floor of a building and I want to get to the rooftop, how do I get there?
You take the stairs or the elevator, one of the two.
Well, sometimes you can take an elevator if you're lucky, but most times we got to take the stairs.
Yeah.
And those stairwells are your broad avenues of effort that it takes to reach your goals, and those are your strategies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Every now and then on a stairwell, you got to stop and rest. Well, when you get my age, maybe you got to stop and rest.
Yeah.
Or you got to check and see how you're doing and check progress. Those landings in the stairwell, those are objectives. So that's where we start to make those measurable and achievable. You know, we use the SMART acronym.
Yeah, you get to celebrate a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Here's where we want to be at year 1. Here's where we want to be at year 2, et cetera. And the steps you take to get to those landings, those are your tactics, right? And once I have that in place, then I can put in effective key performance indicators to tell me how am I progressing towards achieving my goals, implementing my strategies, and achieving my vision and accomplishing my mission. And it's all tied together. And then we take one last step, and we look at this whole set of mission, vision, goals, strategies, objectives, and tactics that we developed. We go back to our SWOT analysis, and we ask ourselves, are there strengths we're not leveraging? Are there weaknesses that we still need to overcome that we're not working on? Are there opportunities we should pursue that we're not pursuing? And are there threats that are out there that we need to mitigate for?
So, you know, what I hear you saying is that's really what kind of like a quarterly business review or something like that should be doing, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
They should be going back and seeing where they are and going back to the information, that the assumptions that they made, the SWOT analysis, the ideas, everything they put in place, and saying, how are we doing?
Well, absolutely. So, you know, and you start with a 3 or 5 year vision of where you want to go and the goals for 3 to 5 years, and then you work back. And then your quarterly, you're saying, you know, the term from Traction is, you know, what are the big rocks, right?
Yeah.
So you are defining your big rocks for the quarter, and then your meetings are all about how we doing on the big rocks. But you have to tie those into your longer term vision and goals.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just, you're not necessarily getting where you want to go.
Yeah. And you have to have those meetings. You have to have those landmarks. You have to have those conversations. And from a leadership perspective, that's where I see leaders start to fall down as well. Mostly moving from, you know, the lower maturity levels into the higher level maturities, the rigor, and, you know, they talk about, you know, the rhythm of the organization and the structure. A lot of times the entrepreneurs, they don't like that.
No, absolutely. I would say most of the time.
Yeah.
Because they like that go, go, go excitement. You know, what's next?
Right.
You know, very much the D from DISC, right? So I'm halfway through one thing, I'm going to want to know what the next thing is because I'm bored with this already. Right. So you need to incorporate more management in your leadership as you move forward. And really, one of the big reasons organizations fail isn't because they didn't have a good idea. It's because they didn't have discipline. And there's no rocket science to this. There's no genius to this.
That is 100% the number one thing. And what's so interesting about that is that it's no different from everyday life.
Oh, no, exactly.
Right? I mean, everybody knows how to eat right.
Right? Everybody knows how to lose weight.
It's the discipline that is the problem.
Absolutely.
It is the self-control. It is the self-discipline. It is, you know, staying true to this plan, the commitment level. You know, how much do you want that vision of whatever it is you're trying to decide? So these things are transcendent, right? I mean, they go all through life just being part of human beings. So when you see somebody that doesn't have the discipline, what do you do?
Ooh, yeah, well,
I know that's a tough one.
I don't know, that's a whole other thing.
It is.
But putting a process in place and a standard process that can give them kind of a framework for discipline, and then give them an accountability partner, right? So, I mean, it's just the same thing with you're going to go start working out. Studies show, you know, if I join a gym and I'm going to go work out on my own, I'm a lot less likely to go than if I have an appointment with a trainer that I'm paying $100.
100%.
And
100%.
Because I guarantee you, if I'm paying somebody, I'm showing up.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, right? Showing up.
Yeah, and if I have somebody, you know, I learned this in packaging some of our programs. You know, a lot of times you hear the word free. And when something is free, how disciplined are you with that?
No, I would bet there are a lot of people, this is a free broadcast.
Yeah.
I sign up for these things all the time.
Yeah.
And then something else will come up and I'm like, it was free. I'm not going.
Right.
But if I paid for it,
You throw down $250.
I'm holding that spot on my calendar.
You're probably going to be there, right? And it's kind of the same thing with going back to, performance pay with employees, or talking about what is that intrinsic or that extrinsic motivator that this individual has. And then you get into, well, is this person even, are they a growth mindset or are they a fixed mindset? And that's another conversation also. But my point is that when you're talking about discipline and you're talking about an organization and where they are, this is where that maturity level comes into play of the overall leader and their team, right? Because a lot of times you can have the best strategic planning process in place. You can have all of the landmarks laid out. But if you don't have that one leader that is holding everybody accountable, rewarding and recognizing them, cheering them, supporting them, providing them the communication channels and the rhythm and the rituals and the things that are internal to that business, if that leader is not executing on those, who do they have to blame when the goals aren't reached?
Well, it's them. It's the leaders, right?
Yeah.
So, you just described that, what we mean by engaging and inspiring people, right?
Right.
Engaging and inspiring them to being relevant, right? We're defining, within this process, we're defining the future state of the organization. Here's what we want things to look like in the future. Now I've got to get people to want to be relevant there, right? We want them to be part of that future. So they got to know what it is. We got to tell great stories about what it's going to look like. And look, there's this feeling that people are resistant to change. And I'm not going to tell you they're not. But I think people are smart enough to know that there's no growth without change. But by the same token, it's true that there's also no growth without pain.
Yeah, pain or conflict.
Yeah, well, to your workout analogy,
Pain or conflict.
If you go work out and you're not a little bit tired, you don't work up a sweat, you're not doing yourself a whole heck of a lot of good, right? So it's the same as true in sales, and it's kind of an internal sale, is that we have to tell a story that's compelling enough for our employees to want to go through the pain of change to reach that future state. And if we don't do that, so it's not so much that people don't want to change, it's the failure of leadership to tell a good enough story about why the change is worth it.
Right.
Because if you don't convince me the change is worth it, if I'm going to go work out and I'm going to diet and I'm going to give up all those things I like to eat and drink, I have to believe 3 months from now I'm looking good enough that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And if I don't believe that, I can tell you I ain't going to do it. So.
Right. And you got to have that compelling reason to actually do that. So I'm glad that we reached that point. Springboard Your Biz .com is really about leadership, and that's why we've kind of taken this common theme with Springboard Your Biz TV around how are we going to deal with the environment. These were things that were external to us, but there's opportunities with the threats that are there. And so if we take a look at what we can control and we can understand the right business maturity model, we can ask ourselves the right questions in order to make the right decisions in order to actually capitalize on this. So I appreciate you for showing up today and sharing your wisdom with us, the insights. The conversation was excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I've had a ball. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So today's been an example of the learning that we're going to keep moving in our community and our group coaching courses that are at springboardyourbiz.com. Moving forward, we're going to continue to have more subject matter experts joining us to discuss the monthly Performance Springboard topics that we have, and you can find those on our website. Next month's discussion is going to be about sales and marketing in the work-from-home environment. So again, just kind of continuing down the key springboards, the performance springboards that are going to help to drive business in 2021 and beyond. You can go to springboardyourbiz.com and join the community now. The first 50 are free. I know that we're getting closer to 50. This is month 2. We're a whole 30 days old. And this is a $600 value. So once we get to 50, you will have to start paying to be a part of the community. accessing some of these key questions that we're helping for you to help springboard your biz to the next level. So go there if you're interested in being on the show and being a guest and sharing some of your wisdom, or even creating a show of your own. You can go to springboardyourbiz.com and fill out the guest request form, and we will contact you to follow up with more information. You'll also see the mastermind forums, the group coaching programs. These are all limited seats, and we are going to close those at 20 participants. And for the mastermind forums and the group coaching programs, those come with access to video and access to digital marketing tools that we're going to help you create as you help to move your business forward in this new work from home environment. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the community. I'm looking forward to seeing you next month. And I hope today's show helps you today, tomorrow, and in the future. Look forward to seeing you next month.